Okay, this lesson is obviously it's not the entire lesson, um, but it should at least give you a brief summary of how we use the process of completing the square to solve a quadratic equation. Okay, now we have lots of methods for solving quadratics, but this method works every single time, although it's a little bit cumbersome sometimes. So let's start with a nice quadratic here. We got x squared plus 20x plus 20. That's in standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay. To solve by completing the square, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure this coefficient on x squared is just a 1. Now this one didn't even show a coefficient. That implies there is a 1 right there. If there was not a 1, there was a 2 or a 3, you would divide everybody by that number, and that would make the coefficient equal to 1. Okay, so you want to make sure that a value is 1, and the other thing you want to do is you want to take the constant, the term without any variable, and move it to the other side. So we'll just subtract that 20 to the other side, and it becomes negative 20 when we subtract it from 0. Okay. Now what we have to do is find on the left-hand side here, here's the side we want to make a perfect square. We got to figure out what to add to it, the c value. Right now it's got an ax squared, 1x squared, plus bx, a 20x, plus there's no c value. We removed that c value to make the problem a little easier. And what we do to find out what to add to both sides is you have to do a little math. You take b, divide it by 2, and you square it. For us, the b is right next to the x. Always it's the 20. So we go 20, divide it by 2, and we square it. And you want to simplify inside if you can first. That's 10, 20 divided by 2 squared, or 100. This is the number that you want to add to the left side to make it a perfect square. So I'm going to put plus 100 on that left side. Now because this is an equation, whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So I'm adding 100 to that side as well. Now the entire purpose of adding that was this left side will now factor, guaranteed. It will factor, and it will be a perfect square. X plus 10 squared equals, and on the right side we just let the math do its thing. Whatever we get, we get. In this case it's an 80. And at this point we have a quadratic equation whose left side is a perfect square, and we can solve it now. I'm going to put that on a new page here, and we'll look at how we solve that guy. Now that the x is inside a perfect square, I can square root both sides. On the left hand side I take the square root of something that's a perfect square. On the right hand side I get plus or minus root 80. Now this right hand side is the part that causes some people a little bit of stress, but you just have to simplify that. Now take that 80 and see if it breaks down. Let's do 16 times 5. 16 times 5 is 80, and I like that because I can square root the 16. So we're going to take that square root of 16, which is 4, and the 5 stays under the radical. And then I take the 10 over by subtracting it. It becomes minus 10 when it moves over to the right side. And there's what x is. Notice how my equation now says x is this. Now remember, these are two solutions. X is negative 10 plus 4 root 5. We actually saw how to find that on the calculator, the decimal value. And we also get x equals negative 10 minus 4 root 5. So there's the two solutions. Those have decimal values. We just usually don't get those because the decimal value has to be rounded. We don't like to round answers in math. We don't have to. We like exact answers. Okay. So to just review again, going back to the first slide, make sure a is equal to 1 and take your constant to the right hand side, and then remember this little b over 2 squared to figure out what to add to both sides of your equation. At that point the left hand side will be factorable to a perfect square, and then you'll be able to solve it by using the square root method we discussed earlier this week. And that's how you'd solve by completing the square. All the solutions are up online for your homework.